I stepped onto that stage feeling invincible. This was my moment, the kind of viral takedown that would be dissected in articles, turned into reaction videos, and debated for weeks. Clint Eastwood was a relic of the past, and I was the one who was finally going to say it out loud. Bold, fearless, unapologetic. But then he looked at me. Just one glance, cold as steel, and suddenly the words in my throat didn't feel so sharp anymore. One sentence, that's all it took. One perfectly timed response, and the entire room shifted. The audience gasped, the host froze, the internet erupted. And me? I was left sitting there, staring at a man who had just ended my career without even breaking a sweat. But let's go back to the moment I still thought I was in control. My name is Randall Davis, 28 years old, and I make a living by running my mouth. Not in a motivational speaker kind of way. I'm not out here inspiring people, quite the opposite. I'm what you call a professional critic, though let's be honest, that's just a fancy way of saying I get paid to make people angry. Once upon a time, I wanted to be on the other side of the industry. I came to Hollywood with stars in my eyes, fresh out of college, convinced I was going to be the next big thing. Thought I'd land a leading role in some groundbreaking indie film, get discovered by a major studio, and be shaking hands with Scorsese within 5 years. Yeah, that didn't happen. Turns out, Hollywood wasn't exactly knocking down my door. I had the look, or so I was told. But the industry was drowning in guys like me. Medium height, conventionally attractive, just talented enough to book an occasional audition, but not enough to stand out. I spent years waiting for callbacks that never came, waiting tables instead of starring in movies. Eventually, I stopped trying, and instead of being in front of the camera, I found a much more lucrative gig being the guy who tore apart the people in front of it. And I was good at it. See, in the age of social media, being loud is more important than being right, and I mastered the art of being loud. I built my brand off of controversy, hot takes, and the kind of brutal honesty that made people either love me or hate me. I didn't care which, as long as they kept my name trending. Now, my words had weight. I'd written reviews that got directors blacklisted. I'd posted tweets that ruined red carpet reputations overnight. I was the guy who could make or break careers with a single viral post. And tonight, I was about to take down a legend. Hollywood Uncensored, the arena. The show is called Hollywood Uncensored, a panel-style talk show designed to spark debates and feed the internet machine. It's the kind of show where careers can skyrocket or go down in flames, depending on what you say. I've been on here before. I know how the game works. The producers book guests that clash because controversy sells. And tonight's main event, me versus Clint Eastwood. Yes, that Clint Eastwood. The man, the myth, the cowboy who practically built Hollywood from scratch. A guy so legendary that even people who have never seen his movies know his name. And honestly, that's exactly why I picked him. Because his era is over. Let's be real. Nobody's lining up to watch another Clint Eastwood movie. His whole thing? The grizzled tough guy, the lone cowboy, the quiet man who solves his problems with a gun and a stare. That worked 50 years ago. But times have changed. Hollywood has evolved. Audiences want nuance now. They want representation, depth, realism. They don't want some old man teaching young punks a lesson about the good old days. So why was this guy still making movies? That's exactly what I planned to ask him, on live television, in front of millions. And the best part? I already had the headline ready. Clint Eastwood finally called out, and it's not a good look. The moment would be perfect. I could already picture the reaction videos, the Twitter threads, the articles dissecting his outdated worldview, the outrage, the debates, the viral clips. This was going to be the moment that cemented my legacy. All I had to do was light the match. The stage is set. The set of Hollywood Uncensored is bright, modern, and polished, designed for drama. Everything about it is engineered for impact. The crisp white lighting, the roundtable format, the cameras rolling from every angle, capturing every twitch, every micro-expression. The audience is silent, waiting, knowing something is about to happen. And at the center of it all, Clint Eastwood. The man sits completely still, posture straight, hands resting lightly on the table. He looks like he's carved out of pure stone, the kind of guy who could outstare a mountain. The host, some nervous guy in his early 30s, glances at me like he already regrets inviting me. He knows I didn't come here to talk about movies. I lean back in my chair, adjusting my mic, perfectly calm. This is my moment. I take a deep breath, look Clint straight in the eyes, and go in for the kill. Clint, I say, flashing my best "I'm just asking questions" smirk. Don't you think it's time to retire? Boom. First shot fired. I hear a few gasps in the crowd. The host stiffens. One of the panelists, a middle-aged actress sitting 2 seats away, raises her eyebrows like, oh boy, here we go. But Clint? Nothing. Not a flicker of emotion. Not even a blink. I keep going. I mean, your time has passed, I add, letting my voice take on that fake, sympathetic tone I've perfected. My generation is working hard to fix the mistakes of the past, but how are we supposed to move forward when guys like you are still sitting in the director's chair? Silence. The tension is thick enough to choke on. The host grips his cue cards. Someone in the audience shifts uncomfortably. The air feels heavy, like we all just stepped into some kind of invisible war zone. And Clint? Still unmoving. It's like talking to a mountain, so I push harder. No, seriously, I say, leaning forward, owning this moment. Your films are full of outdated tropes. The lone cowboy, the tough guy who solves everything with a punch, the strong, silent type. I mean, come on. The world has changed. People don't want that anymore. A nervous laugh ripples through the crowd. The host shifts in his seat. The audience is hanging on every word. And Clint, still, no reaction. At this point, I'm feeling confident. This is what I do. This is how I win. I push and push and push until the other person cracks, until they start to stutter, get defensive, try to fight back. That's when I go in for the final blow. And that's why I say it, the words that will make headlines. Maybe it's time to admit that guys like you just don't matter anymore. The audience gasps. I can feel it, the moment. This is it, the viral clip, the debate that will rage for weeks. I sit back, waiting for Clint's reaction, and that's when he moves. For the first time, Clint lifts his head. His eyes lock onto mine, and for a split second, I feel something I did not expect. Not anger, not offense, just certainty. Like he's already seen how this ends, like he's watched 1,000 guys like me before, and buried every last one of them. The energy in the room shifts. The audience feels it. Something is about to happen, and for the first time tonight, I wonder if I made a mistake. The first word hit like a loaded revolver slamming onto a wooden table. You know, son, the studio froze. No rustling, no whispers, no nervous laughter from the audience. Just complete, suffocating silence. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the weight behind them. Clint Eastwood's voice wasn't like any other voice in this industry. It was gravel and dust, smoke and fire. It was the voice of a man who had seen more than most could imagine. It carried the confidence of someone who had been here long before any of us were born and would still be standing long after we were gone. And Randall? Randall felt his chest tighten. He had expected Clint to get defensive, maybe even dismissive. The usual response from Hollywood veterans when someone called them out for being out of touch. Maybe a weak deflection, a generic, everyone's entitled to their opinion type of response. He had not expected this. Clint wasn't defensive. Clint was sure, like he wasn't even engaging in a debate, like he was just stating a fact. Randall shifted in his seat. Something about this suddenly felt different. Clint leaned forward slightly, his steel blue eyes locking onto Randall's face with a focus so sharp it could cut glass. There was no frustration, no outrage, just calm, quiet certainty. And then he spoke again. I've seen 1,000 men like you. Randall's fingers twitched. The way Clint said it, so flat, so unmoved. It was like he was reading off a list of names carved into tombstones. The weight of those words felt heavy, not because they were insulting, but because for the first time in his life, Randall had the distinct, sinking realization that he might not be the one in control of this conversation. Clint let that line linger in the air, let it settle like dust after a gunfight. Then, just as Randall opened his mouth to fire back, Clint kept going. Anad. Generations of people who think that if they yell loud enough, the world will change just because they say so. His voice was slow, deliberate, like a man loading bullets into a six-shooter. Randall felt his pulse in his throat. His tongue tripped over itself, trying to find the perfect counter. Something witty, something cutting, something to break the spell Clint had just cast over the entire room. But nothing came. Because now, the audience wasn't watching Randall anymore. They were watching Clint. Every single eye in that room was locked on him, drawn in by the kind of undeniable presence that only a man who has actually lived through history can carry. Randall forced out a chuckle, trying to break the moment. So what? You're telling me I should stop talking and just accept that the world belongs to people like you? Clint blinked. Just once. Then, without even the slightest hesitation, he continued. You called me outdated. His head tilted slightly, not in confusion, not in anger, but in amusement. Randall felt a prickle of heat rise up his neck. That was his line, his move. He was the one who was supposed to be mocking Clint, not the other way around. Clint just shook his head slightly, as if he'd heard this exact same argument before, and then he dropped the hammer. The so-called outdated generation built this country, built these cities, built the industry you're sitting in right now. Randall stiffened. We worked, we fought, we made something. You? Clint let the silence stretch, just for a second. Just enough time for the words to fully land. Then, you've made nothing. The air in the studio shifted. It was a small thing, so small that most people wouldn't have even noticed. But Randall felt it, a shift in energy, a shift in power, and for the first time in a long, long time. Randall Davis wasn't in control anymore. The audience sat frozen. No one whispered, no one laughed, because they all knew what had just happened. Randall opened his mouth, his brain scrambling for a comeback, anything that could regain control of the moment. But Clint just leaned back. His eyes didn't leave Randall's. He was waiting. And for the first time in his entire career, Randall Davis felt the weight of his own silence. It was suffocating, like a man standing in front of an oncoming train. Then, in a voice so quiet that it somehow hit harder than a shout, Clint added, "You're not an actor. You're not a director. You're not even a real critic." Randall's breath caught in his throat. Clint didn't raise his voice. He didn't break eye contact. He just let that sentence settle, let it crawl its way into Randall's skull and take root. Then, just when the silence became unbearable, Clint delivered the kill shot. You just run your mouth online and hope that makes you important. Boom. The studio reacted instantly. A low ripple of noise, somewhere between a gasp and a murmur, swept through the audience. Someone let out a whispered, "Oh, wow." Randall's fingers curled into fists beneath the table. This was not how this was supposed to go. He had walked into the show thinking he was the one setting the terms, the one dictating the direction of the conversation. Now he was the one getting torn apart. And Clint was barely even trying. Randall's chest burned with frustration. His pulse pounded in his ears. He had to say something that would flip this back to him. "Hey," his voice cracked slightly as he forced it out. "I thought we were talking about movies, not some outdated idea of masculinity or..." Clint tilted his head again, and then, like a cowboy delivering his final shot in a duel. "But you weren't talking about movies." Bang, another direct hit. Randall's breath caught. Clint didn't even look at him anymore. He had already moved on. The audience erupted. Some clapped, some cheered, some just sat there, stunned into silence. And Randall? Randall sat there, staring at Clint, feeling his entire world shift beneath him. For the first time in his career, he had nothing to say. Randall was wrecked. His face burned like someone had poured boiling water over it. His fingers twitched uncontrollably, gripping the table like it was the only thing keeping him from collapsing. He could still feel the heat of the studio lights beaming down on him, but suddenly, the room felt twice as hot, twice as suffocating. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something deeper, something he had never felt before, because Randall Davis had spent years mastering the art of the verbal knockout. He was the one who controlled conversations, who dominated debates, who pushed and pushed until the other person snapped. But tonight, he had been erased. And the worst part? It happened so easily. Clint hadn't yelled, hadn't insulted, hadn't raised his voice even once. He just spoke. And in less than a minute, Randall's entire persona, the cool, confident, untouchable critic, had been obliterated. The cameras were still rolling. The audience was still buzzing, whispering, some laughing, some still stunned into silence. The host, who had spent most of the show sweating bullets, was now looking anywhere but at Randall, probably praying to disappear into the floor. And Clint? Clint wasn't even looking at him anymore. That, more than anything, was what made Randall's stomach clench. The eye. It wasn't that Clint had won the argument. It wasn't that he had delivered the most devastating verbal takedown in live television history. It was that he had already moved on, like Randall wasn't even worth remembering. That realization hit harder than anything Clint had actually said. Randall needed to fix this. He needed to recover. Now, the desperate attempt to save face. He forced a laugh, a dry, weak, obviously forced laugh. Wow, Clint, really taking this personally, huh? He smirked, or at least tried to. His mouth barely cooperated. His face still felt hot, stiff, frozen in place. It was supposed to be a joke, a way to deflect, to make it seem like he wasn't bothered, like he hadn't just been completely dismantled on live TV. The problem? Nobody laughed. The host shifted uncomfortably. The panelists sat there, watching but not engaging. The audience? Some of them were still in shock. Others were too busy whispering to each other, already reacting to what had just happened. But the one person who didn't even acknowledge the joke? Clint. Still not looking at him, still not reacting. Randall's stomach twisted. This had gone so far beyond just a bad moment on TV. He had lost control of the entire room, of the entire narrative. For the first time in his career, Randall Davis wasn't the loudest voice in the room. The internet goes nuclear. By the time the credits rolled and the show cut to commercial, Randall's career was already in flames. He just didn't know it yet. His phone was already vibrating non-stop in his pocket. At first, he thought, oh, good, maybe some support, some messages from people backing me up. Then he looked at the screen. His name was everywhere, trending, exploding, spreading like wildfire. But not in the way he wanted. The clips were already circulating. And the titles? Brutal. Clint Eastwood destroys internet critic in 30 seconds flat. Randall Davis just had the worst day of his life on live TV. Eastwood silences, loudmouth critic, studio erupts. Within minutes, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and every possible social media platform had been taken over by the clip. The moment Clint had ended him, it was everywhere, and then came the comments. Brutal, unforgiving, endless. Dude really tried to take on Clint Eastwood and forgot that Clint Eastwood doesn't lose. I have never seen someone get humbled this fast in my life. Randall Davis was eliminated from Hollywood with no chance to respawn. Bro, just log off. It's over. Randall felt sick. Then the memes started. A picture of Clint looking completely unimpressed with the caption, "Boomers when they see nonsense on the internet." A screenshot of Randall, mid-shock, captioned, "When your entire career ends in one sentence." A fake news article that read, "Missing person alert, Randall Davis. Last seen on Hollywood Uncensored before being vaporized by Clint Eastwood." Randall's hands were shaking. This wasn't just backlash. This was destruction. The fall of Randall Davis. The next morning, the real impact of what happened hit like a freight train. Randall rolled over in bed, phone still clutched in his hand, notifications still pouring in faster than he could even process. But then he noticed something worse than the memes, silence. Not online, in Hollywood. For the first time in years, Randall's inbox was empty. The emails from PR reps, gone. The usual texts from producers, nothing. Invites from talk shows, non-existent. Even his agent, who used to call him every morning with updates on potential deals, had gone completely radio silent. Randall sat up in bed, heart pounding. He opened his messages, scrolled, nothing, checked his email, refreshed, still nothing. Hollywood had frozen him out. Producers who used to beg for his takes now acted like he didn't exist. Randall Davis, the man who had built his entire career off of being the loudest voice in the room, was now invisible. And the worst part? The part that hurt more than anything else? Clint Eastwood didn't even care. The man who walks away. While Randall was watching his reputation crumble in real time, Clint Eastwood was, well, living his life. No tweets, no reactions, no statements. Because Clint Eastwood doesn't need to argue. Clint Eastwood doesn't need to explain. Clint Eastwood ends careers and sleeps peacefully. And that's exactly what he did. By the time Randall realized what had happened, Clint was probably already halfway through his morning coffee, completely unbothered. Because at the end of the day, Clint Eastwood doesn't debate. Clint Eastwood doesn't argue. Clint Eastwood destroys. And then, he moves on. All right, let's be real. If you were in Randall's position, how would you have handled it? Would you have kept pushing back, trying to regain control of the conversation? Would you have laughed it off, played it cool, and acted like it didn't get to you? Or would you have just accepted the L and quietly disappeared from the internet for a few months? Think about it. One sentence, one moment, and everything you built, your reputation, your career, your credibility, gone. What would you have done? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where one conversation, one wrong move, or one unexpected response completely flipped the script on you? Maybe you had a debate go south, got called out in front of a crowd, or found yourself in an argument that didn't end the way you expected. Or maybe you know someone who had their own Randall moment, a time when they thought they were running the show, only to realize too late that they had picked the wrong fight. Share your stories below. Let's get the discussion going. And hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into moments that shake the internet. We analyze, we dissect, we learn. At the end of the day, this isn't just about drama. It's about understanding the power of words, the weight of experience, and the importance of knowing when to speak and when to listen. We share stories like this not to tear people down, but to bring awareness, spark conversation, and hopefully make the world just a little bit better. Because at the end of the day,